We poured 5 years of our lives, every penny and every dream, into building our future. Then, one declined debit card revealed my husband was secretly funneling it all into a colossal lie. The smell of lemon polish and fresh coffee filled our small apartment. It was the scent of our future, the scent of a Saturday morning spent poring over spreadsheets and property listings. My husband, Mark, was leaning over the dining table, a pencil tucked behind his ear, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up and gave me that smile, the one that always made my stomach do a little flip, even after 5 years of marriage. "Another $500 into the house fund this month, Sarah," he said, his voice brimming with pride. "We're on track. The Miller dream home will be a reality before we know it." I leaned over and kissed his cheek, my heart swelling. We were a team. Every decision, every sacrifice, we made it together. We both worked decent jobs, but we lived frugally. We packed our lunches, we skipped expensive vacations, and we drove a 10-year-old sedan. All of it was for the down payment on a little house with a yard for the dog we hadn't adopted yet and a spare room for the baby we dreamed of. Our joint account was a testament to our shared discipline, a sacred space where our two incomes merged into one unified goal. The only slight crack in our perfect partnership was Mark's mother, Brenda. She had a flair for the dramatic and a talent for making me feel like the villain in her son's life story. To her, I was the woman who had stolen her precious boy and was now hoarding his money for frivolous things like a future. Every Sunday, we'd go to her house for dinner, and it was always the same routine. She'd sigh dramatically over a stack of bills on her counter, lamenting how the price of everything was going up, and shoot me a pointed look as if my choice to buy organic kale was single-handedly causing national inflation. Mark would just pat her arm and say, "Don't worry, Mom, we'll figure it out." I always assumed "we" meant him giving her a little cash here and there, maybe $50 or $100 to help with her groceries. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I understood. She was his mom. The first tremor that shook the foundation of my world happened on a Tuesday. I was at the grocery store, my cart filled with our carefully budgeted items for the week. At the checkout, my debit card was declined. Declined. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. I tried it again. Declined. The cashier looked at me with pity. I mumbled an apology, abandoned the cart, and rushed out to my car, my hands shaking. This had never happened before. We always kept a healthy buffer in our checking account. When I got home, I immediately logged into our online banking. My heart pounded against my ribs as the page loaded, and then I saw it. A transfer. A big one. $2,000 sent just yesterday. The description was vague. Family support. My mind raced. Did our car need a major repair I didn't know about? Did Mark have a medical bill? I scrolled back through the months of statements, a cold dread seeping into my bones. There it was again. Last month, $1,500. The month before, $2,000. It went back for years. Large, consistent withdrawals, all labeled family support or mom's bills. It was like watching a movie of our life, but with a secret, horrifying soundtrack. Every time we'd celebrated hitting a savings goal, a huge chunk of that money had already been siphoned away. Every time we'd skipped a date night to save money, that money hadn't gone towards our house. It had gone to Brenda. The numbers were staggering. It wasn't $100 here and there. Over the past year alone, it was over $20,000. Our entire down payment, and then some. I felt the air leave my lungs, replaced by a feeling so cold and sharp it felt like I'd swallowed glass. He hadn't just been helping his mother, he had been funding her entire life with our future. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I sat in a state of numb shock for hours, the bank statements glowing on the laptop screen like an accusation. I needed to see it. I needed to understand the lie with my own eyes. I waited until Sunday, the day of our weekly ritual of humiliation. I drove to Brenda's house, my stomach in knots. I walked in and forced a smile, playing the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law. The evening was a blur of passive-aggressive comments about my new haircut. A bit extravagant, isn't it? And my cooking. Mark always preferred my lasagna. Finally, after dinner, Brenda started her performance. She pulled out a crinkled electricity bill from a pile of mail. "Oh, I just don't know what I'm going to do," she sighed, dabbing at a non-existent tear with the corner of her napkin. "They're threatening to shut it off. It's just all so much for a woman on her own." I watched Mark. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the table. He wouldn't look at me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, white envelope. My blood ran cold. It was cash. He was hiding the transactions now by taking the money out in cash. As he started to slide the envelope across the table toward his mother's waiting hand, I found my voice. It came out low and steady, cutting through the silence of the room. "Is that from our house fund, Mark?" Brenda gasped, clutching her chest as if I'd physically struck her. Mark froze, his hand hovering over the envelope. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were wide with panic, like a cornered animal. He looked from me to his mother, then back to me. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "Well?" I pressed, my voice gaining strength. "Is that another $2,000 of our dream you're giving away?" he finally snapped. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the dishes rattle. He looked at me, but his expression wasn't angry. It was one of pure, unadulterated shock, as if he was hearing the words for the first time himself, as if the reality of his actions was crashing down on him in that very second. He looked at the envelope full of cash, then at his mother's greedy eyes, then at my betrayed face, and he blurted out, the words tumbling out in a torrent of horrified realization. "I give my entire paycheck to family," he said, his voice cracking. He wasn't saying it to me as a justification. He was saying it like a man confessing to a crime he didn't even know he was committing. Before I could even process his insane confession, Brenda stood up, her face a mask of righteous fury. She snatched the envelope from the table and pointed a trembling finger at me. "You ungrateful girl," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Mark is just honoring the agreement we all made before he was foolish enough to marry you." Agreement? The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It felt alien, like a word from a language I didn't understand. I looked from Brenda's triumphant, venomous face to Mark's, which was now ashen. He was shaking his head, a frantic, silent plea for me to ignore her, to just let it go. But the dam of my composure had broken, and a flood of cold fury was rushing in. An agreement? An agreement? About the money my husband and I earned together? An agreement I was never told about? "What agreement?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Brenda scoffed, pulling the envelope of cash to her chest like a shield. "The one where Mark promised to take care of his family, the promise he made to his father on his deathbed. A promise that he would always put his mother first, no matter what gold-digging distractions came into his life." She shot a look at me that could have curdled milk. The car ride home was a symphony of suffocating silence. Mark drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I sat staring out the passenger window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of yellow, each one a flash of memory. Mark promising we were a team, Mark drawing blueprints for our dream house on a napkin, Mark kissing me and telling me our future was secure. It was all a lie. Every single moment was tainted by this colossal, secret deception. When we walked into our apartment, the scent of lemon and coffee that had smelled like hope this morning now smelled like a stage set for a tragedy. I didn't sit down. I stood in the middle of the living room, my arms crossed, and waited. He wouldn't look at me. He just stood by the door, fumbling with his keys, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Mark," I said, and my own voice sounded foreign. "Tell me about the agreement." He finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot and pleading. "Sarah, baby, it's not what she made it sound like. My dad, when he was sick, He made me promise. He knew Mom wasn't good with money. He was so worried she'd end up on the street. I was 22. I was terrified. I promised him I'd always make sure she was okay. Okay is one thing, Mark. Funding her entire existence with our life savings is another. You told me you give her your entire paycheck. No, I mean, not literally, he stammered, running a hand through his hair. I meant, it feels like that sometimes. I get my check, I pay her mortgage, her car payment, her utilities, her credit cards, and whatever is left over, I put into our joint account. I swear, everything that goes in there is clean. It's our money. I felt a dizzying wave of nausea. The pieces were clicking into place with a horrifying clarity. His paycheck never even touched our shared finances. His entire salary was a direct pipeline to Brenda. We had been living and saving on my salary alone. My salary was building our dream. His was propping up his mother's comfortable lifestyle, paying for her shopping trips and cable package, the very things she'd accused me of being extravagant for. Our partnership, our 50-50 effort, was a complete illusion I had foolishly believed in. For 5 years? I whispered, the reality of the timeline crashing down on me. For our entire marriage, you've been lying to me? I wasn't lying, he insisted, his voice rising in desperation. I was honoring a promise. I was going to tell you. I was waiting for the right time after we got the house. The house we were never going to get? I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. The house we were saving for with only half the income I thought we had? When was the right time going to be, Mark? When we were 80? He flinched. He had no answer. Because there was no good answer. There was only the lie. And now, the fallout. I walked past him, my legs feeling like lead, and went into our bedroom. I needed to think, to breathe, to find some solid ground in a world that had just turned to quicksand. As I opened our closet to grab a blanket, my eyes fell on a dusty box on the top shelf. It was a simple cardboard box labeled Mark's Keepsakes. He'd always been sentimental about old papers, photos, things from his father. A cold, terrible thought snaked its way into my mind. A promise made to a dying father is one thing. A formal, ongoing financial conspiracy is another. Brenda had said, we all made an agreement. It wasn't just Mark and his dad. It was something more. My trust in my husband's words was a pile of ash. I needed to see the truth for myself. My hands trembled as I pulled the box down. It was filled with old report cards, photos of a teenage Mark with a terrible haircut, and stacks of yellowing papers. I dug deeper, past the sentiment, searching for something that felt cold and official. And then I found it. It wasn't a letter. It was a multi-page document held together with a staple, typed up to look like a legal contract. The title at the top read, Family Support and Filial Responsibility Agreement. My blood ran cold. I sat on the edge of the bed and forced myself to read the clinical, merciless paragraphs. It laid everything out in excruciating detail. It stipulated that upon his father's passing, Mark, as the primary earner, would be responsible for Brenda's mortgage, all household utilities, a monthly stipend for personal and living expenses, and any outstanding debts she incurred. It was a financial life sentence. And at the bottom, there were the signatures. My signature wasn't on it, but 3 others were. Brenda's in her loopy, self-important cursive, Mark's looking shaky and young, and a 3rd signature next to the line labeled Witness. It was Mark's older brother, David, the one who always acted like my friend, the one who'd clapped Mark on the back at our wedding and told him he was the luckiest man alive. The entire family had known. They had all been in on it. But that wasn't the worst part. The date, printed neatly at the top right corner, felt like a final, fatal twist of the knife. It was dated 1 week before our wedding. 1 week. They had sat down and formalized this heist, this lifelong diversion of my husband's income, 7 days before he stood at an altar and promised to forsake all others and build a life with me. The document felt heavy in my hands, not just paper and ink, but the weight of 5 years of calculated deception. Every anniversary dinner, every shared dream whispered in the dark, every sacrifice I had happily made was now framed by this ugly, premeditated betrayal. They hadn't just lied to me. They had built my entire marriage on a foundation of lies. I felt a strange sense of calm descend, the kind that comes after the storm has passed and all you can see is the wreckage. I folded the paper, placed it back in the box, and put the box back on the shelf. I walked out of the bedroom, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. Mark was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his face a mess of hope and fear. "Sarah," he started, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Please, we can fix this. I'll talk to her. We'll change the arrangement. We can't," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "There's nothing to fix, Mark. You made a choice. You all did. You chose your mother's financial comfort over a real partnership with your wife. And you made that choice before I was even your wife." His face crumpled. "What are you talking about?" "The agreement," I said, making air quotes with my fingers. "The one you, your mother, and David all signed. The one dated the week before our wedding. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could just keep bleeding our future dry forever?" The color drained from his face. He looked genuinely stunned that I knew about the document, about David's involvement. It was clear he had compartmentalized his life so completely that he couldn't imagine his two worlds ever colliding. "How? It doesn't matter how." I cut him off. "What matters is that it's over. I'm done. I want you to pack a bag and go to your mother's house." Panic flashed in his eyes. "No, Sarah, please, don't do this. I love you. This is our home. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake, but I can fix it. I'll tear up that stupid paper. I'll tell her the money is stopping. I'll do whatever it takes." "The money you've already given her, Mark. What about that? The $100,000, maybe more. That should be in our savings account right now. Can you get that back? The 5 years of my life I spent saving and planning for a future that was a fantasy, can you get that back too?" He had no answer. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The fight went out of him, replaced by a devastating wave of resignation. He knew I was right. He slowly stood up, looking around our small apartment, at the photos of us on the wall, at the throw blanket I'd knitted that was draped over the armchair. He was looking at the life he had just destroyed. Without another word, he walked into the bedroom. I heard drawers opening and closing. 15 minutes later, he walked out with a duffel bag over his shoulder. He stopped in front of me, his eyes pleading for one last chance. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "I know," I said. And the terrible thing was, I believed him. I didn't think he was malicious. He was just weak, trapped by a promise made long ago, and manipulated by a mother who knew exactly which buttons to push. But sorry wasn't enough. It couldn't rebuild my trust or refund my stolen future. I just stood there, silent, until he finally turned and walked out the door, the click of the lock echoing in the sudden crushing emptiness of the apartment. The next few days were a blur of numb activity. I called a lawyer. I systematically went through every financial document I could find, creating a spreadsheet of my own. I tallied up my income for the past 5 years and compared it to what was in our savings. The discrepancy was sickening. It was almost $150,000. $150,000 that had vanished into the black hole of Brenda's finances. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davis, looked at the document I'd found and her eyebrows shot up. "This is highly unusual," she said, peering at the signatures, "but potentially very useful. He committed to this prior to the marriage and failed to disclose it. This is a clear case of financial infidelity, Mrs. Miller. We can argue that any marital assets should be divided based on your contributions alone, since his were being funneled elsewhere without your knowledge or consent. The first salvo came in the form of an official letter from Ms. Davis to Mark, requesting a full financial disclosure and outlining my intent to file for divorce based on fraud. The response was not from Mark's lawyer. It was a phone call 2 days later from my brother-in-law, David. "Sarah, it's David," he said, his voice oozing a false, friendly warmth that made my skin crawl. "I think we need to talk. This has all been a huge misunderstanding." "Has it, David?" I replied, my voice ice. "Were you misunderstanding things when you signed as a witness on a contract designed to defraud me for the rest of my life?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Look, I know you're upset," he said, his tone shifting to one of placating condescension. "But you have to understand our family dynamic. Mark is the responsible one. I'm not. He was just doing what Dad asked. We can sort this out like adults. You don't need to get lawyers involved and make this ugly. Mark wants to make things right." "Does making things right involve returning the $150,000 he gave your mother?" Another pause, longer this time. "Well, let's not get carried away," he chuckled, a nervous, unpleasant sound. "The money's gone, Sarah. Mom needed it. But we can set up a payment plan. Mark can start contributing properly to your marriage now. Just call off the lawyer. Let's meet for coffee and sort this out, the four of us." The four of us. The arrogance was breathtaking. He actually thought I would sit down at a table with the 3 people who had conspired to ruin me and calmly negotiate the terms of my future subjugation. "There will be no coffee, David," I said firmly. "Any and all communication can go through my lawyer from now on." I hung up before he could respond. The next day, a package arrived, a registered letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. My heart hammered against my ribs as I signed for it. This was it. This was Mark's official response. I sat at my dining room table, the same table where Mark and I had planned our dream, and tore it open. My hands started to shake as I read the first paragraph. It wasn't a divorce filing. It wasn't a settlement offer. It was a lawsuit. Brenda, with David as her co-plaintiff, was suing me. She was suing me for tortious interference with a familial contract and demanding that I not only drop the divorce proceedings, but that I be legally compelled to turn over half of my own paycheck to her to compensate for the emotional distress and financial instability caused by my malicious actions. I stared at the legal document, the words blurring into an incomprehensible jumble of jargon and audacity. Tortious interference, malicious actions. It was a complete inversion of reality, a masterclass in gaslighting printed on expensive legal letterhead. They weren't just defending their conspiracy, they were weaponizing it, painting me as the villain for exposing their grand deception. She wanted my money. After years of secretly taking my husband's, she now had the gall to demand mine directly as a punishment for rocking the boat. My lawyer, Ms. Davis, was apoplectic when I forwarded her the documents. I could practically hear her seething through the phone. "This is the most ludicrous, frivolous lawsuit I've seen in my 20 years of practicing family law," she fumed. "This is a scare tactic, Sarah. A pathetic, desperate attempt to bully you into submission. They have no legal standing, none. A private family agreement that was intentionally hidden from a spouse has zero validity in a court of law. In fact, this works in our favor. They've just admitted to the conspiracy in writing." Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves, but the psychological toll was immense. My life had become a battlefield. My phone rang constantly with unknown numbers, which I ignored, assuming they were members of Mark's extended family calling to pressure or guilt me. My email was flooded with messages from Mark, swinging wildly between pathetic apologies, desperate pleas for reconciliation, and angry accusations that I was tearing his family apart. He claimed to have no knowledge of the lawsuit, that it was all Brenda and David's idea, that he was caught in the middle. I didn't believe him for a second. He was a passenger in the car his mother was driving off a cliff, but he had handed her the keys and a map years ago. The discovery process was a nightmare. Their lawyer demanded access to all of my personal financial records, my spending habits, my work history. They were looking for any dirt they could find, any purchase they could frame as extravagant to support their narrative that I was a spendthrift who had callously cut off a poor, dependent widow. It was a violation, a calculated campaign of legal harassment. Ms. Davis fought back every step of the way, filing counter motions and drowning them in our own requests for Brenda's complete financial history. We wanted to see exactly where our $150,000 had gone. Weeks turned into a miserable month. I was barely sleeping, living on coffee and anxiety. The small apartment that once felt like a cozy sanctuary now felt like a prison. Every object held a memory of Mark, a ghost of the life I thought I had. I needed to get out to reclaim some part of my life that wasn't tainted by him and his family. I started boxing up his things, a painful but necessary ritual: clothes, books, toiletries. As I cleared out the nightstand on his side of the bed, my fingers brushed against a small, loose floorboard underneath. I had never noticed it before. Curiosity got the better of me. I pried it up with my fingernails. Beneath it was a small, hidden cavity. Tucked inside was a slim, black ledger book and a stack of bank statements from an account I had never seen before. My blood turned to ice. It was an account in Mark's name only, at a different bank from our joint one. The statements went back 7 years, to before we were even married. With trembling hands, I opened the ledger. The first entry was dated 2 weeks after his father passed away. It was a $5,000 deposit labeled Dad's Life Insurance. The subsequent pages were a meticulous record of every dollar he had given to Brenda. Every mortgage payment, every credit card bill, every cash withdrawal was noted in his neat, precise handwriting. It was all there, a secret history of our marriage written in dollars and cents. But as I flipped through the pages, I started noticing another set of entries, a different pattern. Every few months there were large withdrawals, ranging from $2,000 to $5,000, labeled simply D, not David, just D. Who was D, and why were they getting chunks of the money meant for Brenda? I turned my attention to the bank statements. There they were, the corresponding transfers, all going to the same account number, an account that belonged to neither Brenda nor David. Then I saw it. At the bottom of the ledger, on the very last page, tucked away as if it were an afterthought, was an entry that made my breath catch in my throat. It was dated a month ago, right before I discovered everything. It was a transfer of $10,000. The label next to it wasn't Mom or D, it was one word: nursery. A cold dread, heavier and darker than anything I had felt before, settled over me. Nursery. Why would Mark be spending $10,000 on a nursery without telling me? It made no sense. We were saving for a house first. We hadn't even started trying for a baby. He knew that. We had a plan. Unless the plan I knew wasn't the real plan at all. I frantically searched the internet for the account number the D in nursery transfers had gone to. It wasn't a personal account. It was a business account, linked to a high-end baby boutique and interior design service in a wealthy suburb an hour away. The business was called Danny's Dream Nursery. The owner's name was listed on the website: Danielle Peterson, David's ex-wife, the one he supposedly had a nasty divorce from 3 years ago, the one Mark had always claimed to despise, calling her a snake who took his brother to the cleaners. Yet here he was, secretly funneling thousands of dollars to her for years. My mind was reeling, trying to connect the dots. Mark, David, Brenda, and now Danielle. This wasn't just a simple case of a son supporting his mother. This was a complex, multi-layered financial scheme, and I had been the unwitting bankroller for all of them. The lawsuit, the aggression from Brenda and David, it wasn't just about controlling Mark. It was about protecting a secret far bigger than I could ever have imagined. And as I stared at the name Danielle Peterson, one final horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I remembered her from family gatherings years ago, before her divorce from David. I remembered that just last Christmas, Brenda had been showing off photos on her phone from a friend's new grandchild, a beautiful baby girl. I hadn't paid much attention at the time, but now a chilling detail came back to me. The baby in the photo had Mark's eyes, those same bright, blue, unmistakable eyes. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. It wasn't just a financial conspiracy. It was a betrayal so profound, so intimately devastating, it completely rewrote the last 5 years of my life. Mark didn't just have a secret financial agreement. He had a secret life, a secret child. The $10,000 nursery payment wasn't for a hypothetical baby we might have one day. It was for a very real baby that already existed. My dream of a family with him was a lie he let me believe in while he was building one with someone else. The lawsuit suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. It wasn't just a desperate attempt to keep the money flowing to Brenda. It was a smokescreen, a vicious, preemptive strike designed to paint me as an unstable, malicious person, to discredit me before I could uncover the bigger, uglier truth. If they could ruin my reputation, who would believe me when I told them about the baby? They were trying to bury me under a mountain of legal fees and public humiliation to protect the perfect little family unit they had built behind my back with my money. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The anxiety and grief were replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman with a purpose. They had started a war, and I was going to end it. The next morning, I walked into Ms. Davis's office, placed the secret ledger and the bank statements on her desk, and told her everything. I told her about Danielle, the secret payments, and my suspicion about the child. As she examined the evidence, her professional demeanor cracked, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief and then a slow, grim smile. "Oh, they are not going to know what hit them," she said, her voice a low hum of anticipation. "This isn't just a divorce case anymore, Sarah. This is a strategic demolition." Our strategy shifted. We subpoenaed Danielle Peterson. We requested DNA testing for Mark and the child. We filed a countersuit against Brenda and David for conspiracy to commit fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We amended my divorce filing to include adultery, citing the financial evidence of his long-standing affair with his brother's ex-wife. We weren't just asking for the marital assets. We were coming for every penny they had fraudulently taken from me, with interest and punitive damages. The day of the depositions was a scene I will never forget. Brenda arrived looking like she was attending a funeral, draped in black and clutching a rosary. David was pale and sweating, his smug demeanor completely gone. Danielle was a wreck, her eyes darting nervously around the room. And Mark looked like a ghost. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the polished surface of the conference table as if it held the answers to the universe. My lawyer was masterful. She began with Brenda, calmly walking her through her finances. She presented bank statements showing not just mortgage payments, but weekly cash withdrawals, charges for spa days, weekend trips, and designer handbags. She showed how Brenda's claims of poverty were a complete fabrication, funded by my hard work. Brenda stammered and lied, but the numbers didn't. Then Ms. Davis brought out the ledger. She asked Brenda about the payments to D. Brenda feigned ignorance, claiming she had no idea where Mark's money went after she received her stipend. Next was David. Ms. Davis presented evidence that the payments to his ex-wife, Danielle, often coincided with large purchases he made, a new car, a down payment on a condo. It was a clear money laundering scheme. Mark was paying Brenda, who was then giving a cut to David under the table, which he funneled through his ex-wife's business account to hide it from his own divorce settlement. The nasty divorce was a sham. David and Danielle were still a team, and Brenda was their willing accomplice. David's face turned a mottled shade of red as he refused to answer, on the grounds that it might incriminate him. Finally, it was Mark's turn. Miss Davis didn't ask him about the money. She slid a single photograph across the table. It was the picture of the baby girl, the one I'd found on Danielle's social media, a beautiful child with his bright blue eyes. "Mr. Miller," she asked, her voice soft but sharp as a razor, "can you please identify the child in this photograph?" Silence. Brenda let out a strangled sob. David put his head in his hands. Mark just stared at the picture of his daughter. He looked up, his eyes finally meeting mine across the table. They were filled with a universe of shame and regret. "Her name is Lily," he whispered, his voice cracking. She's my daughter. She's 2 years old." It was over. The lawsuit against me was dropped the next day. Faced with irrefutable evidence of perjury, fraud, and adultery, they folded completely. The judge in our divorce case was appalled. He didn't just grant the divorce. He eviscerated Mark and his family in his ruling. He awarded me 100% of our marital assets, including the full value of our savings account and the apartment. He ordered Mark to reimburse me for the full $150,000 he had given to his family, citing the clear evidence of financial fraud. He also ordered Mark to pay all of my legal fees. Brenda and David were held jointly liable for a portion of the fraudulent funds and were ordered to pay me punitive damages for their malicious lawsuit. I sold the apartment and never looked back. I used the settlement money not to buy the little house with the white picket fence. That dream was dead, but to invest in myself. I went back to school, got the master's degree I'd put off to support our savings plan, and started my own consulting business. The pain of the betrayal never completely vanished, but it transformed. It became a fire that forged me into someone stronger, more independent, and far more discerning than the naive young woman who once believed in a shared dream. Sometimes I wonder what happened to them. I heard through the grapevine that Brenda had to sell her house, and that the financial strain ripped what was left of their toxic family apart. Mark is now legally and financially tied to Danielle and their daughter, forever entangled in the web of lies they all wove together. I don't feel anger anymore, just a profound and distant pity. They built their lives on a foundation of deceit, and in the end, it was the only thing they had left. My foundation is built on truth now. It's a foundation I built myself, one solid, honest brick at a time. And from here, the future looks brighter than any dream they ever stole from me.